looking at just to not to one more question on this, and we'll move on. I promise. But I was looking at my notes from your talk, Chris, a couple of years ago, and I have in my notes here, which I find very interesting, that you mentioned a hypothesis that you had that, or a flow being the balance between anxiety and boredom, and that's where retention happens. And I thought that was a very interesting statement, very interesting hypothesis. Do you still believe that? And can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, I still believe that, though I might use slightly different words. We definitely can't be overly anxious, at least not in the sense of debilitating anxiety that gets us like all torn up, that takes us away from the task, if we want to be in flow, if we want to learn optimally. Though at the same time, a little bit of facilitating anxiety, as some people call it, is okay, and perhaps in some cases even necessary, because it keeps people going. It helps them to do the task. It's better than apathy, than not caring, and it's definitely better though than debilitating anxiety that takes away from doing the task. So to be in flow, you can't be in debilitating anxiety. That's definitely true. As for boredom, maybe I would instead now use the word disengaged. You can't be disengaged, and you can't be experiencing debilitating anxiety.
Okay.
But yeah, the board is a little hard because I guess it kind of captures what we want it to. But if we say you can't be bored, it also leaves out the possibility of, I would say, boring, but possibly necessary activities like paying taxes, generating flow.
Well, it goes back to, I like to say in my classes that adjectives represent opinions, right? So what's boring for one may not be boring for another. So, like you said earlier, a task that we're doing is hard to be universally flowy, I guess we can say, because half the class may be really
Flowy, I
into
like
it,
that.
and half the class may not
Hey,
be.
I'll confess, I've heard my students say that. Oh, this is really boring. I've admitted. I said, listen, I know this is boring, and then students will say maybe in the next sentence, but it's necessary, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. Like
Exactly.
as long as they realize it, right, Chris? Yeah, yeah,
If
yeah.
they see a point for it, they're probably going to be okay doing it.
Before we wrap up, because I had two really last questions. The first one is, I think you talked about earlier, but I just want to harp on it one more time. Is flow Can flow be achieved in groups? So if I'm working in a language
Oh yeah,
setting with a group of 3 or 4 people, and we're doing a task, planning your next birthday party, for example, can the 3 or 4 of us in my group all be in flow at the same time?
absolutely, yes. There's research on that that says that group flow experiences are particularly powerful, especially when there's a good vibe, when there's good dynamics uh, among the people who are in that group, and that people in a group can feed off of each other. But at the same time, everyone's different. There's people who hate group work. It could be because they're really, really introverted, but it could be because they just don't vibe with the people in their class, because of their personalities, because of their interests, because they have a very different learning style or a very different language level. There could be all different reasons that students don't like group work, and as a result, I shouldn't use the word like, but don't feel they benefit from group work, and as a result don't get flow out of it. But yes, in theory, uh, group work is good for flow, provided that there is good group cohesion, or and that they at least
Right.
see a point for doing what they're doing.
Nice. Nice. And then last one from me is on the teacher side, so teacher education side. Based on flow and its conduciveness to learning, language learning specifically, and task-based learning, a lot of training programs for language teachers focus kind of on the opposite, on very rigid planning and grammar and these kinds of things. So if you were in charge of kind of advocating for teacher education, both at a very entry level and then just on a development scope, as we go through our careers as language teachers, how would you integrate flow into that process, or the concept of
I
flow?
teach I teach classes for language teachers and language teachers to be, in my current job, and I do include a unit specifically on flow in some of my classes, and it's contextualized with units on other emotional aspects of language learning, like motivation, like anxiety, like self-efficacy, and also with, I think this is a different course. I sometimes mix courses together in my mind with task-based teaching and project-based learning. And when I give students feedback on lessons, or when I give teachers feedback on lessons I've seen or lessons I've heard about, the things that I keep coming back to are generally, I would like to see more open-ended activities, because these activities are more likely to be interesting or useful, and more likely to be authentic, to produce realistic, meaningful language use, and prepare students as a result for the real world. And going with that, I often find myself saying, I want to see more authentic materials or non-learner centered materials, as in materials that are made for fluent speakers by fluent speakers, rather than by whoever it might be for language learners. So those are pretty much the two things that I keep coming back to when I comment on lessons or teaching. I don't usually talk about flow except when I'm in a more theoretical class, but I'm sure you might see some themes there, that the things that I'm telling them I'd like to see are things that are likely to favor flow, even though I'm not using the word flow. I try to keep it more concrete, at least in certain classes.
Sounds great. Yeah.
Beautiful.
More authentic materials and more open-ended, real-world focused tasks.
All right.